The St. Louis Blues were one of those teams in this year's draft where you can kind of tell the strategy they're looking at, so let's find out why that might be. Starting off at 16th overall, the St. Louis Blues drafted, to me, one of the most undervalued players in this year's draft class in Adam Jiricek. He got injured, and it really sucks. It was not a very nice looking injury, and for me, the last month leading into that injury, he was looking a lot better than he did the first few months of the season. When I do my work, I try to set aside injury concerns here and there and trust that teams are doing their medical due diligence on players, and knee injuries are also not usually what they used to be. I evaluated Jiricek as if he wasn't injured, and I really have been impressed with this player over the last 2 years, and he was one of the best defensemen available in my books. The instincts that he brings defensively, the positional awareness, and the four-way mobility he has, and the fluid skating he brings is so interesting. He's a player that if I were coaching him, I'd want him to take a little bit more on himself, a little bit more confidence, and a little bit more offensive play. He doesn't really do that a whole lot right now, and it works for him. He can play a relatively safe and dependable 200-foot game, but I do think Jiricek has the potential to be a really good pick for a 16th overall slot. At 48th, the St. Louis Blues went a little off the board for me, going with a prep school defenseman in Colin Ralph. Now, I did go watch Colin Ralph about the last week or two going into the draft because I saw he had played in the USHL. He didn't really blow me away there. I think the pace of the USHL was a little bit too much. A lot of people talked about his skating ability, and I didn't really see that at that level. So to me, Ralph wasn't a guy that I'm looking at 48th overall, and maybe I would have looked a different direction. But when we look at the rest of the guys this team drafted, he was one of a bit of a pattern of tall, lanky guys that need physical development, but could become guys in the NHL at some point. He's a 2005-born prep school defender who didn't really blow me away in the USHL, and to me, that's not the best recipe for the mid-second round. But again, if I'm wrong, cool. The St. Louis Blues got an interesting big defenseman to play with. Then at 56th overall, they drafted another big defenseman, but a very young one of the youngest in the draft this year, in Lucas Fischer of the Sarnia Sting. I think Fischer has some interesting mobility to him for a big guy, and I think that's what they're betting on. When it came to actual results in the games that I watched and tracked of Fischer, things were quite mixed, and this was a bit higher than I think I would have taken him or started thinking about taking him, but you give him a few years with Sarnia, he'll play a ton of minutes, so he should become a little bit better, and I think there could be an interesting defensive-leaning player here who can produce offense here and there through his shot from the point. At 81st overall, funnily enough, they drafted my 81st ranked player in Ondrej Kos. Kos was a player that I did really like watching at the Holinka tournament for his home country, Czechia, and he did get injured relatively early in the season, missed a bunch of time, and played his first hockey in months at the under-18 tournament. At that tournament, I felt that that's what he looked like, a player who hadn't played in months. But thinking long-term and big picture, I really like Ondrej Kos. He's a big, powerful, but really skilled player who plays with a good pace in his game, and I would happily participate in the discussion to take him in this range. I think as the fourth player you're drafting, he's a pretty good upside bet, and I think this was one of the more intriguing picks that St. Louis made, and I was pleasantly surprised to see him taken where he went. At 95th overall, the St. Louis Blues drafted a player that I had a really hard time with in Adam Dzeko, and it feels like a lot of people in hockey did as well. I spoke to some people who see him as a potential top 6 player. I spoke to some people who said that they would be surprised if he were an NHL player at all. To me, I fall somewhere in the middle. I think Dzeko, with time, could become a decent bottom 6 guy who can eat minutes, eat pucks along the boards, and make simple plays that drive decent levels of offense, but nothing that really blows you away. I would like to see him be more physical. I'd like to see him ramp up the pace of his game just a little bit to push guys on their heels a little more than he already does, and I think he should have a good developmental situation with the Oil Kings and play a ton of minutes, and who knows where he goes from here. As the 5th guy you're drafting, sure, I can see the appeal of a guy like Adam Dzeko. There were just other players I might have looked at ahead of him, especially big ones that I think bring a little bit more now that you don't have to wait for. At 113th, they drafted Thomas Mrsic, and I was intrigued by Mrsic over the course of this year. He's a great shooter. I can't argue with that. He's got some decent mobility, he's got some high pace in his game. I just don't know if it's going to be enough to project to the NHL, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. I think traditionally speaking in the NHL, he's probably a top 6 guy or not an NHL player at all. I could see him being a really good AHL scorer, but I do think Mrsic brings some interesting tools that are high-end that could develop into something more in the future. At this range of the draft, I don't really have a problem with taking a chance on Thomas Mrsic. He was on my final ranking board, he was one of the last players I put on there, so let's see how it goes. At 145th, they drafted William McIsaac, who I did watch quite a few times this year with Spokane because he caught my eye while watching Berkeley Catton. He's tall and lanky, but he's a really good skater with some skill, and I do think that he sees the ice pretty well most of the time, and I think if you think very simply and safely about his game, I could see something there. He's got a physical side that I would like to see a little bit more of in the future, but I think this is an interesting blank slate to work with if you want a tall, lanky defenseman. And honestly, relative to Colin Ralph and Lucas Fisher, I don't think he brings that much less value, so who knows? He's an interesting player, and we'll see what happens. He touched my list at some points this season. I just didn't have him there at the end of the year, but late rounds, I thought he would be an interesting swing. At 209th, the St. Louis Blues drafted Antoine Dorion, son of Pierre Dorion, former Ottawa Senators general manager. Look, with Antoine Dorion, you have to keep something in mind. The Quebec Remparts were not great this year. The thing with Dorion that I noticed when watching him since the draft is just that he's really smart. I don't know if there's an NHL player there. He kind of reminds me of like a bit of a smaller version of Raul Boyard, if anyone watched him play this season. He's an interesting, cerebral, thinking first type center. I don't think there's much there in the way of NHL upside, but it's 209th overall. I'm not going to complain. I think some good players went undrafted, but hey, maybe they're doing a solid for Pierre. Maybe Antoine turns out to be really amazing, but there are smarts to rely on, and who knows what happens around that profile. At 211th, they drafted Matvei Korotky, who is a big physical center playing in the St. Petersburg system in Russia. I watched Korotky this year. He produced pretty well. He just didn't really move the needle a whole lot for me. He wasn't really a high-paced guy. He kind of was like the Adam Dzeko of the Russian Junior League this year, if that makes any sense. I think he's a bit of a long shot, but he's a big center who can play pretty well, pretty smart, and I think he's got some good power in his game, but I think he's a bit of a long shot. 211th overall, not a huge deal. So the St. Louis Blues pull a 2B in this draft. I think overall, considering what it seems like they look for in a player, they did pretty well. They drafted a lot of big players that are quite raw and need some development time, and that's perfectly okay. If one of them or two of them works out, then they've done well with their draft picks. I think they could have aimed a little higher, but that's just probably a difference in philosophy, and that's okay. Adam Jiricek, I think, is a great bet. Ondrej Kosh, I think, is a great bet. Thomas Mercic is an interesting offensive bet. Will McIsaac is a curious bet in the mid to late rounds. I think there's some interesting players that they drafted, even if I might have gone in a little bit of a different direction. I don't know how much pure high-end upside there is in this draft class, but they could end up with a couple of players that round out their lineup here and there, playing certain roles and doing decently well. So a 2B feels reasonable for them, and I thought they did decently well. So that's it for the St. Louis Blues. If you liked it, be sure to check our description box for a Fanatics affiliate link, where anything you buy in the store from there will give us a small kickback, or you could subscribe at Scouching.ca, where a subscription gets you access to a private Discord server, as well as data tables for drafted, undrafted prospects, and plenty of other things that you can check out on that site. So that's it for the St. Louis Blues, and our next one will be on the Vegas Golden Knights.